Welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art.
Hi, welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast. I am glad to be back home from TCW. It was 2 weeks. That's draining. It is exhausting.
It's a different type of draining because it's a combination of you're using energy and you're also processing everybody else's. So it's a combination. You do get up. I do find like an uplift, guys. So those who
100%.
Who watch it may or may not know, we did the TCW for the last 2 weeks. So it's a fundamentals 1, and then we have a couple days off, and then we do a fundamentals 2. So it's, for us, it's 8 days of training, and it's an interesting mix because it's hard to describe the energy and what happens there because it's unique to that place and that event, and everybody does this thing to lift everybody else up and bring the most out of everybody. But it's a lot of energy going around. And so at the end of it, I'm pretty drained too. I
think when I say exhausting, it's not like a bad thing. It's actually a fulfilling exhausting. Like you're providing, or you're fulfilling Caesar's mission of what he wants. And so that's to see the students kind of grow through those moments. Like Katie, for example, is a perfect example. For those of you guys that don't know, Katie was a student that came, I believe, in 2019.
No, she came before that. Wasn't she there? She's been there. That was her third time.
Her fourth time, I think. I think she came to Fundamentals 1. She came back to Fundamentals 2 and then did Fundamentals 1 again. Or no, she did Fundamentals 1 and then came back to Fundamentals 1 and 2 back to back. And then she came back to Fundamentals 2 for the fourth time.
Huge. I mean, that's monumental.
I don't know if you knew this, but so we do these exercises for Fundamentals 2 where we create like a shelter environment and we give the students tasks to like go grab the dog, but you have to identify the energy. So Caesar talks about front, middle, back, like happy-go-luckies, which ones are the sensitive dogs. And so a lot of times we pair the student with the things that they struggle with the most, right? So that we can make them better in those situations. So Katie was tasked to get, was it I can't remember what dog she had to get out.
She was, so what we were, in trying to recreate something for Katie, she showed us a video where she had a baby. She has a baby now, and her dogs were a little bit close and a little bit excited to the baby in the video they showed. So Jojo used the Roddy and the Bloodhound.
Yeah.
And recreated that same thing. But what was she holding? She was holding a chicken.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And she also had like a walking stick too.
Explain what the walking stick was for.
So this is what I was going to get at, by the way. So when she did Fundamentals 2, when I was her trainer in Fundamentals 2, I did the same thing. And I didn't even know Jojo was going to do that. And we did that because in the video that she shared with us, with the dogs were getting a little bit too close, we wanted to make her bigger. And so she could use like a stick to almost like make her a little bit larger. So the dogs gave her a little more respect, more distance from the baby. And so obviously we can't use a baby, but we had a chicken. What the chicken's going to create is a forward motion could trigger a prey. And same thing with when humans bring their babies into the home, it could trigger prey because of the sounds and things like that. And so
at the very least, a lot of curiosity, which kind of creates that, her dogs were showing a lot of excited curiosity.
Yeah. And so, basically we were trying to recreate that scenario in a safe way where she could all block and teach the dogs to give space to what she was holding. And so that was kind of one of the cool things. But I will say, yes, that was great what she did. But the big thing was that her transformation as a human being, because she came in, I think her mom had purchased her a spot for TCW, not knowing what she was about to get into. She brought her dog, Stella, the Roddy, and she came in really underweight. Like she was depressed. She was not in a very good place mentally. And then she left inspired after Fundamentals 1 and decided to come back and still get inspired. And now she has a baby that's 3 months old. And now her baby's so cute, by the way. But not only that, like how she
it came from you, man.
No, but did you see her boyfriend? Looks just like him.
Yeah.
And so, she is like, she's not underweight anymore. Like she was, she looks healthy. She looks really good.
Well, what's fun about the class, and it takes this shape. Every class or every other class, there'll be like a distinct like mascot in the class. Like one student in the group becomes who everybody wants to lift up. And she was
Yeah.
that one
She
when she
was.
came the first time. And
Yeah.
I mean, she basically just told us that that was almost life-saving for her, that was like a life-altering moment
Yeah.
in very deep and profound ways. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's the part of the program that feeds my soul.
Yeah.
You know,
Same.
it's, I come home definitely with a little bit of a bonus from those situations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a lot of, transformations that happen there, but also there's even the work I think that the students need to do when they get home, because, the students come from different backgrounds. There's some trainers that come in, there's some non-trainers that come in, there's dog owners, there's people who don't even own dogs that come.
Right.
I had one of those students, fundamentals one, didn't
Yeah.
even own a dog. I forgot his name. Crap.
Brandon? Was it? No, was it
No,
Brandon?
it was,
No.
Wow, I never forget names, and I just forgot his name. It slipped my mind.
I never forget faces. I'm looking at the guy on my face right now. All right, I know exactly who you're talking about. For some reason, I can't think of his name.
It'll come to me.
All right.
Anyways, it's going to bug me the whole episode now.
Happy retirement.
Thank you. Yeah. So the announcement was that I have retired from TCW, and I wrote a letter. I wrote a emotional letter to Caesar, and I shared the letter. I read it to all the students and in front of everybody, and pretty much just said that it was time. I'd been there for 11 years. I really believe that someone else needs to step in that role, and I think we just need some new faces in there. And luckily, I was grateful that it was received well. Caesar talked to me after, and he was like, "Whatever I can do to help you out." And it was nice because you never know how it's going to be received, and he just received it very gracefully. And
That's
he
because
was.
we've all been waiting for you to fucking clock out, dude. It's been a long time coming. So
Congratulations.
just kidding.
Yeah, but it's sad that I won't be going up there, but at least I still have the friendship with Caesar. And I asked, he's obviously, I said, can I still come back? He's like, of course. Yeah, he didn't say that, but after he did say that I could come back. Well, after we were done and we were outside talking, I shared a story with him, and I don't know if you definitely remember this. Remember after COVID, we had gone to DPC to do the leash workshop.
Yeah.
Remember that? And so remember the day before, he sat us all down, all the staff, all the trainers, and he got us like in a horseshoe shape, and he was sitting in the middle, and he's like, what did you learn from COVID? Like, what was the thing what was your experience that you learned through all this trying times? And all of us kind of shared their stories of like what you learned. And that moment is a moment I will never forget, because one of the things that he shared with us is about sacrificing. There's things that you're going to have to sacrifice in life to get to where you are. And he's like, when I was, first came to the US and I had young boys, I sacrificed my time with them because I was working all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether you sacrifice time from your family or time to spend time with family, you sacrifice money, and so there's always like, no matter what you do, you're going to sacrifice something. You just have to decide what you're going to sacrifice and what is the like negative outcome that comes from that as well.
Well, it's the same thing when helping dog owners. It's use your resources. It's money, time, and energy.
Yeah.
So if you've got money, you can use that to help. If you got time, get to work. If you've got it's like, so you're always giving up something when you get something. One of the funniest quotes that I've ever logged away that has so much truth to it is from Phoebe in Friends, believe it or not. And she goes, there's no selfless good deed, right? So no matter what you're doing that makes you feel like if you're doing something for others, you're really getting something for it. So there's always an exchange, no matter what. There's always going to be an exchange. You're going to give up time with the family. You're going to give up something. But I think at the end of the day, the reason we all keep coming back is, honestly, I think it's each other. I don't want to speak for others, but I think in some weird way, we all come back because we enjoy the company of each other, and nobody wants to let each other down. There's this crazy accountability to everybody else. Like, I'm accountable to you, accountable to Caesar, accountable to the team, accountable to the students. Everybody's we all want to make sure nobody's disappointed in each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that is unique there, that nobody fights, nobody really argues. It's just this weird camaraderie. Who do you
Yeah.
think would fill your spot? Be a good one to fill your spot.
Angela. But
Yep.
and this is where it gets challenging because her role is so valuable. Maybe she could do both. I don't know.
No, you wouldn't be able to do both. Her role is the most. I don't know. Is it difficult? Because it depends on where you stand. Like if you don't like standing in front of people, my role is the most difficult. But if you don't mind, you know what I'm saying? It depends on
Yeah.
how you see things. She knows how to do that part with the dogs better than anybody. I think I'd have the most trust in her over anybody.
She makes our jobs easier.
Oh my God.
By
Think
selecting
about
the
back in the
dogs.
day, dude, we didn't have
I know.
any of that. I mean, it
I know.
was only, I think, like 2017, 2018 that we started to make that transition. It was when you know what? It was when we started Fundamentals 2, when we started to bring in dogs for Fundamentals 2, we started to make the connection that we could bring in dogs for for the program.
Yeah.
And I think for the students, it's infinitely better to handle dogs that aren't yours.
Yeah. Totally agree.
I don't think they understand the connection to their dog is part of the problem. It's difficult to unlearn something with the dog you learned it with.
Yeah.
And using another dog is always, I think, a better thing. I posted those puppies yesterday.
I saw that.
Yeah, I was like,
Those
I
cute
think
dogs.
these dogs worked for us and those rescues worked for us. So I think it's a try to help them out. It looks like 2 of them have been applied for.
Nice.
I don't know if the 3rd one has yet or not, but
Nice.
hopefully. Yeah, they were sweet dogs. I put in the post, though, they need social work.
Yeah.
They definitely need socialization. I took each of them out by themselves, and like the little black one was really
More
easy.
sensitive.
Yeah, but super sensitive and was a little bit apprehensive when it saw other dogs. It would come in and sniff from behind, but it didn't know how to handle anything if it was up from the front.
I think also having all 3 of them together is a hindrance. I think if you were to separate them, maybe it actually work out a little bit better.
Probably at this point.
Yeah.
I think they're somewhere between 4 and 6 months old. It said lab German Shepherd mix on there, but they were pretty much all Shepherd.
Yeah.
In appearance and action.
Yeah.
To me.
All right. So what are we getting into today?
Well, I think coming off of the TCW and having so much experience with that, it's, what do we see that are common both benefits or common positive attributes we see in these people and the most common things that get in the way? At this point, later in my career, I've gotten so ultimately simple. I sometimes feel like I teach. Do you remember the movie with Russell Brand and damn it, they're in Hawaii.
Yeah, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and the dude that teaches surfing on the beach, he's like, no, do less,
Yeah.
man, do less. Because he's like, no, man, you got to do more than that.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like I'm that guy. Like I'm like, no, man, you got to do less. You got to do less.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing that some of these people can take away is that they're so clogged up with intellect and information that they've gone to too many people. They've read too many books. They're looking for too much knowledge and not enough experience. And I think that's the hugest difference.
And that was something that we brought in. We talked with Caesar in the podcast, like relearning new things.
Yep.
And that was a question you asked Caesar, like, have you had to like relearn new things? You're like, no. He was like, no, been doing it the same way.
I think that makes sense, right? So if you haven't had to relearn something, that means the way you think about it is like all in.
Yeah. But if there's any question, like for example, we can talk about one of the students who you'll know who I'm talking about is a big intellect, big time intellect.
Yep.
And you going into it, like you never want to make people wrong, right? And my goal was never to make him wrong. My goal was for him to come to an acceptance, but question if what I'm doing, not so much working, but I just have an open mind that there's something that we're missing, that we want this information. And so this student was a big intellect, a scientist, come from a science background, has a lot of information, knows how to do a lot of really important work and read science papers and this and that. And I knew this going into it. And he shared with me that at the end, he was like, hey, Art, do you have 5 minutes? I'd like to chat with you. I'm like, of course. What do you got? And my goal was never to like, let me sit down with you and tell you that your intellect is hindering you. He has to come to his own conclusion. And he did. He was like, there's obviously something that I really want to learn. He's like, I'm an intellect. I know it's hindering me. I know that it's hindering me because I can only see things through the science, through what the papers say. He's like, but there's something in that is outside the science that really, because of the variables and things that change, you can't come to a conclusion. You have an inconclusive, uh, idea that doesn't really doesn't get you anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So he was like, I'm here to learn the instinctual side from Caesar. Like there is something that he does that he knows that can't be proven through science. You just can't.
But even the fact that he's trying to learn it means that it's going to be very difficult for him to get out of that paradigm.
Right. And
You
you
know
have
what
to
I mean?
feel it. You have to feel it.
So in my opinion, it would, like, if I had him, and if I were to really go, all right, if you're giving me permission to do these things with you, I would completely prevent that man from reading anything. I would not allow him to have any intellectual interaction with information in regards to dogs, almost to the point where I'd blindfold him and throw him in a shelter. What he needs, I'll tell you what he needs. He needs the treatment of being in a pack of dogs for multiple days, week, with the inability to talk is what he needs. He needs to get to where he's, so in my opinion, you would want to learn the knowledge last, almost. And I know that
Yeah.
sounds confusing, but what I think you need to do is sometimes get a little bit dirty and start to like say, okay, this works and this doesn't, and then learn why after the fact, because then what it gives you a different reference point on what to do. These people that come in, to me, this is where the knowledge and experience are completely where it kind of trashes you. We saw it on a few occasions. There's two that stand out to me, and I think both of these people were dog trainers. One was when we were doing sheep herding, and the girl with the Doberman was going out, right? So if you come from knowledge and if you come from the intellect, or you're always processing information, early on, we teach you that you really need to regulate excitement. And that if you have a dog on a leash and they pull out in front of you, we really need to be cognizant of that and not allow those things, right? So that's knowledge. And if you just take that and apply it liberally, then you're going to make this mistake, which is now we have you in this pen where there's sheep and we want your dog to herd sheep, right? And your dog gets excited because it sees the sheep and it starts to pull towards the sheep, and you correct the dog. And now what does the dog not do?
Not go shoot the sheep.
It doesn't herd the sheep because you communicated something that seemed right. From intellect, it seemed right, but you were not pulling yourself far enough out of the picture to actually see what you're trying to accomplish, right? So that's the experience. And we see that over and over again when people would take a dog on stage that's nervous and then they would immediately correct it, and not really understanding that in doing that, you're inhibiting your ability to actually guide the dog through the next step of the process, because that dog, in being corrected by you, now doesn't trust you, right? And there were some dogs that if you didn't correct them when you got on stage, you wouldn't be able to control them.
Yeah.
And being able to recognize the difference of when to use knowledge and how to use knowledge is experience. And that's, to me, what I see as the biggest difference, is that those things get conflated. And I would prefer people go for the experience first, not worry about how to say it or teach it, but do it. And then as it becomes comfortable to you, the ability, so that the guy that we're talking about, let's fast forward and let's say, we're a few years ahead, and he's managed to get himself in all the right situations that basically he's now instinctive with what he's doing. Imagine what that motherfucker could talk about with his knowledge and intellect if he used that on the backside as opposed to the front side. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, that guy could explain things to you 400 different ways. He could tell you the chemistry and all these different things behind it to support or I guess negate what might be common knowledge. I mean, that type of brain is valuable in our world, but the problem is without the instinct, it's just another scientist that's going to try to say, oh, dogs think like people, and then they put the dog in an MRI and like, see, that part of the brain lights up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So he impressed me with that, with the intellect, but at the same time, I could feel the trap in it. I could feel it. I could feel the trap.
But he knows it. Like that's what he shared with me. He's like, it's because that was one of the questions that we asked was, how is the intellect holding you back? And that's exactly what he said. And just to kind of give you a little something that he also shared with me, and I talked to you about this, Todd. He was talking about how he's studying the dingoes of Australia.
Yep.
Yeah, Australia. And he was saying that the dogs came from a wolf, right? And he says the difference between a domesticated dog and a wolf is the amount of cortisol. He's like, so the more domesticated they are, the less cortisol they have. And because if you think about it, like a wolf, that's for survival, they need cortisol. Like that is just a thing of survival, meaning flight or stress. That's what keeps them safe. Like coyote we saw, that was an animal that had high cortisol. And so I'd never heard it like that. And I was like, that's pretty fascinating. And so he said that the dingoes.
But
What?
are under socialized dogs,
Of course.
have they measured that? So have they pulled a dog out of the woods and measured it? Because to me, I don't believe dogs are domesticated. And I understand the science behind that. But the reason I say that is if you put dogs in the woods and a litter of puppies in the woods, and you did 100 puppies, how many of those puppies are going to naturally be relaxed with humans? And how many of them are going to act the same way that coyote did? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Almost feral. So if we can call a dog feral, does that mean they're domesticated? Or is it behavioral circumstances that leads to, right? Is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the low cortisol that allows for it? Or is it that if you're in nature, it creates the higher, like lack of socialization creates the cortisol spikes?
And by the way, so like this is this could go a hell other way, but anytime I see like street dogs and they're out there and yes, they may be like feral and nervous of humans, but they're surviving, they're thriving. They're not anxious sitting in the corner, they're not that. But we as human beings, we got to save that dog, and we go out and we trap it, we get it, and we bring it home, and now the dog is anxious. So did we just do that dog a disservice in the name of saving them?
100%, dude. 100%. When I was I had to go to Thailand, and we were doing those 2 days events with Caesar, and my job was to get the dogs for the event, just like we were talking about Angela does. So we had rescue contacts in different countries, and so I went to Thailand. I went to this house. These ladies that ran a rescue in a residential house somewhere in Thailand. And
Was it Mary?
What's that?
Was it Mary?
It could have been. I have a photo of it on my website where I'm standing out in front of this house with like 30 dogs around me. There's probably 80 dogs in this house. And every single dog was exactly the same, what you just described. Exactly the same. So these were dogs that were living on the street, probably skinny but satisfied. Right? They had the ability to move around as they needed to, but then they get into this house and they all became the same. As soon as you put a leash on them, they all acted trapped. You had high levels of avoidance of all of them. And it was dogs that had in no way, shape, or form behaviors consistent with what we see in our indoor, dogs that live with people and live here in the States. They were all the same. And that's what I'm saying. It's an interesting question to say dogs are domesticated just because there's a cortisol level that's one way or another. Mm-hmm. When behaviorally speaking, there's a distinct difference in the way that they act.
Because while they were out there, yes, they may have some cortisol, but now the cortisol even spiked even more inside the house.
Right? Because now they're in a perpetual state, like the brain is stuck in that, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And this is where the whole science and experience, I would rather have experience. And then I would like the science to back it up. For example, I had a dog. I've always said that I believe a large majority of some of these skin and stomach issues in dogs that have a lot of anxiety is just the inflammation.
Yeah.
And so to back that up, when I was down at Monica's, I've done a couple of cases where I've take their temperature because I could, because they have the vet's office there, and they were warm. So they were inflamed. And I think that's where using experience and leading into intellect is helpful. And I think in many ways, that's part of what I do at Caesar's place is I help take this instinctive coding that he uses and bring a lot of intellect to it and analogies and ways to feel it and experience outside of just the instinctive realm, trying to get, all right, it's like dating, blah, blah, blah. It's trying to get people to understand it through what people do know. Because it's very difficult to understand dogs instinctively until you've had so much repetition and experience with it that things just flow off of you. And again, I think that's where the students struggle is they're very choppy in their execution, because they're coming from their head.
Yeah. But I did, because I'm a connector. And so I felt that, not that I couldn't help him, but I felt that he could go this certain direction to get help. So I sent him to someone that I know, that I trust, that is an intellect, but also very instinctual. This person also does martial arts. The person I send them, he does martial arts. So I felt that there could be a connection that they could get to other than just dogs. And also I send them, because you talk about put them in a pack. I actually sent them to someone that I know that has a pack of 60 dogs in Germany to connect with her so he get that experience. And I mean, I got the experience of walking with freaking 60 dogs off leash in the forest, and it was freaking amazing. It was awesome. Probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, like just being around a
What do
bunch
you
of
think
dogs.
that would have been like at the beginning? Right. So you're what's interesting with you is that you've gone for a lot of deeper education later in your career. Right. So after you've known a lot of stuff, you've continued to educate yourself. I'm a little almost educationally ignorant in a lot of this stuff. You
Yeah.
have really gone on a good. So what do you think it would have been like to go work with that lady year one? Helpful, hurtful?
Both, maybe, because here's the thing, like there's very few people that have really like made me go, wow, that's impressive, right? I can name them off on one hand. Lynn, Caesar, first of all. Lynn, Colleen. I met Colleen early in my career, right? She was the first person that I got to experience. And this woman in Germany. So four people that and the reason why it really messed me up is because her pack it's controlled chaos. It is a lot of excitement, but she lets it happen, and she's aware of everything that is happening around her. Like, you talk about awareness of, I think her pack is like 40-ish, and then she has like an assistant that has like 20, and she's aware of every detail of everything, but not over micromanaging it in a way. And it was kind of weird because I was like, I wouldn't let that go. I probably wouldn't let that happen. But she just like trusted the whole thing. Like, she had this so much trust in her pack, and like she could send them away and they would all run together, and she would whistle and they turn on a dime and come back and lay at her feet. It was freaking cool. Like, it was pretty amazing, like the control that she had. And I always think that that's what people experience when Caesar, way back in the day, when he would take the pack to Runyon Canyon, and you got to experience the stuff with Lynn. Like, those are not my experiences. And so I think a part of me wanted to experience those things, but I knew Caesar was not going to get his pack again, that big pack. I knew Lynn was not going to have that. So I wanted that experience. And I think that it, in some ways, would have helped me, but also hindered me, I think, in some ways. Because at the end of the day, like, I have to be true to myself on what I do. And there's some things that I won't do or wouldn't do that she did, and vice versa,
Right. So what do you think? We've both been doing this now for a very long time and seen, hard to say. I mean, the exact number of students, I'm curious of what it
Thousands.
is.
I mean,
But
if you think about 30, we multiply 30 times 50, that's an average of how many students we get.
yeah, and so we've
1,500.
done at least, yeah. What do you think what do you think is the most difficult thing for the students to process while they're there? I've got my opinion, and again, I see things a little more pulled out because I see everybody, and I know you do too, but the focus is a little bit smaller. But I kind of see the same thing repeated in everybody, and if I don't see it, it's a standout. If somebody is not doing, if somebody's like pulling this off properly, they're a standout. What do you think is the hardest thing?
Man, ask the first question you asked again.
So what do you think is the hardest part for the students to process and understand during this process of dog psychology, what we teach them?
Yeah. I think the hardest thing for them to process is their role in their dog's behavior, how they feel about certain things, how that influences their own dog's behavior. And that's what we talk about: energy. How do you feel? What are you trying to accomplish? And people they don't know how they feel, or if
Correct.
they're not honest about how they feel, and they don't know what they're trying to accomplish. They don't know what the intention they're trying to create. So my goal is always to recognize, how do you feel right now? And people say good. Well, good is not an emotion. Tell me how you really feel, right? Tell me how you feel. And then what are you trying to accomplish right now? And people are like, hey, who's that? Oh, it's Blueberry. Blueberry.
Blueberry pancake.
It's cute. People, they don't know what they want, and they don't know how they feel. So just by that in itself, they're not going to get anywhere. So
Yep.
what we do is we bring an awareness to say, how do you feel? I feel like I'm really anxious right now. A lot of people, I think this round were more open and more like, they called it like, I'm excited, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. I feel like I'm judged right now. And so people are really honest. But then even though how you feel, what are you trying to create? Right. So what do you want out of this whole thing? And then, so because we don't know how we feel, and because we don't know what we want, our dogs have a hard time understanding how to be around that emotion. And they also have a hard time being around, there's a place that's not clear. So if the human doesn't know what they want, the dogs are clearly not going to know what we want.
And what does it make? What do you think the dogs, or how do you see it affect the dogs? So as soon as you just described confusion, basically,
right?
Like
Dogs are confused,
right? And you can see it. What does it look like for people listening? What does a confused dog look like?
So if a dog that's confused, the way they pace, they kind of look around, like they're looking around, like, what am I supposed to do? Like lost. They look lost. Like a dog like is confused,
and they can't stop moving. They get real fidgety. They get which makes which makes the students think they have to do something, but since they're not clear on what they're doing, they start to apply things that are more confusion, and like then the dog gets more of what you're describing. And it like snowballs. I think that's a pretty good description. They don't know what they want. And they don't know how they feel.
Well, going back to what you said about the Doberman, by the way, that went into the sheep herding, like there was a confusion. Like this was an exercise for your dog to get excited and herd the sheep. Like, let's get that instinct in. But she like corrected, like, no, stay here. Like she was so stuck in the heel. Like, you got to heel next to me. No, let that go. This is a totally different experience. And the dog was moved just like that.
One of the things I kept asking my students to do is pull themselves out far enough to see the whole picture for things like that, right? So you can get out far enough and really see, okay, people get really tunnel vision and they like focus on one thing, but they don't even know what that thing is. I think that confusion part is probably the biggest thing. And, you know, Caesar was big on how many countries he's had come through. And I would have to say, we've had maybe 40 countries come through. And all of those people, you just said it, how their personal experiences and energy affect the situation. It's amazing what some of those people have been through. Like some of the stories that people were talking about, what they've been through is mind blowing. And we've all been through shit. And I don't think people understand if you don't address your shit, like you can't help your dog. You can't. Like, and a lot of the motivations, when people start talking, what I start to feel is like that deep down motivation. So much of what we do is used to deal with a lot of what those people were talking about, like our decision making, the way we move, the way we act. So you want to like you felt something was out of control as a kid. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to hyper control this dog, or you're going to zero control this dog. And until you understand that that's coming from something that's almost woven in your DNA, like you can't just technically get yourself out of that. You can't just get yourself out of that from good handling. You have to unwind the ball of like emotional thread that is. Take a deep dive into Lake U, and figure out why you have the motivations of hyper control. I have to know everything. I need every piece of information out there and I need it now. Or where you're so passive, your timing is non-existent. Like you can't even take information in and figure something out in 2 seconds. And by the time you do, it's 3 seconds too late.
Yeah.
That stuff is really in the way.
I also think, if you think about like Caesar, he has his pyramid of his philosophy. He's got the 5 laws. He believes that there's 5 laws that can't be broken. Then you've got the principles, 10 principles of achieving balancing harmony. And then the last thing is the technique. And I think people are always focused on what do I need to do? But it's not what you need to do. It's what you need, what you're trying to work towards. And then you figure out what you need to do in order to work towards that. And so that's why, like, I'm always priming the students, like, we're going to do these things. We're going to go through we're not going to go through the motions. You cannot just go through the motions. You can't just do the technique. You have to know what you're after. So I told everyone, like, look, my main goal with any dog that I work with is to connect with that dog on a deep level, on a very deep spiritual level. And how do I connect with a dog? Because I can move the dog all I want, but until I've connected with the dog, the dog's not going to connect the dots. So I'm like, my goal for anything is to connect with this dog. So I'm going to do these things with the intention of connecting with the dog. I actually did a post on this yesterday on my Instagram about just going through the motions. A lot of times people do the technique, but they don't ever do it with the intention of connecting with the dog, or connecting with the animal. And so what does that look like? When as soon as the dog's like, I get what we're doing, now they start looking up at me, and then I acknowledge it. Boom, I'll touch it on the nose. Thing I learned from Lynn. I touch on the nose, and I thank you. I appreciate that. And then we move, and they're like, whoa, that was cool. I want more of that. And they start working for that connection. So
let's go back to that for just a second, just for people listening. That little deal that you just explained, I've done for years and years and years. That little, I'll actually just grab the tip of the nose, just this, like that. And that is the intimacy. A lot of people touch the dogs on the backs and all the shoulders and all these things, but real true intimacy and connection comes in here with dogs, with each other, little touches and little acknowledgments of thank you. Like you just said, that's huge. And, a long time ago, I heard that dogs could see the image in your brain. We all carry, like right now, we're looking at a computer. We all kind of have that screen in our brain. And I learned that the dog can see it, or at least that was the belief, right? That the dog can see your thoughts, your images, know what you want. And I think that's why the ability to be so crystal clear in what you want from a dog in any second is so important. I heard you say it a lot. That's what you don't want. That's what you don't want. What do you want? So as I would walk by your group, I would hear you say, that's what you don't want. What do you want? Do you do that purposefully so that people have that clear a picture? I think that clear picture is vital. Without it, what technique and tool are you going to use to get to a blank picture? It's like handing somebody a paintbrush, but they don't even have a color, versus handing somebody a paintbrush who's got the colors and the picture picked out and they're ready to paint. The dog's going to feel the difference. And I saw so many students try to give direction before any form of connection. And to me, the biggest thing I see that would help students, help anybody, is learn how to read the information coming back to you. Like, that's vital. So, here's this idea that I want. Here's the tool and the technique I'm going to try. Did the dog respond in the way I was hoping at the beginning? Like, that little series of steps is missing.
Yeah.
And once that's in sync, everything changes. But it's that piece of the puzzle that I constantly see that, so you ask somebody, you see somebody snap the leash a couple times. What are you trying to create? Well, did it work? No, but you kept doing it, right? That little sequence of thoughts and executions has to become seamless. It's hard for people to not put enough importance in what the dogs learn when you're doing things wrong. I think the unconscious way people see things is that the dog only learns when you've got it right. Like the dog's only going to, like the dog is learning when you get it right. But no, the dog is learning every time you get it wrong. Like every time you snap on the leash and can't stop your dog from doing something, you taught them something. That's missed. And so the more you do something that's not working, the better you're getting at teaching your dog that it doesn't work. Right? So that concept that learning is always taking place is what I can see they don't see.
Yeah.
There was something
you were there, I think, for this one, because I think you chimed in with my group, and I think someone had said, "What do you do when they bark at the front door?" And people see that action as a wrong thing or a bad thing, but the wrong thing or the bad thing is that the clarity after the dog barks, runs to the front door. What do we do after that, at that moment? Like once we approach the door, right? And I think people like to make the dog wrong when the dog is just communicating, alerting, say, "Hey, someone's here." Mm-hmm. So what our role is that we have to put a limitation on the bark. Says, "Okay, I got it from here. Thanks you for letting me know. Now I'd like for you to go on the bed and hang out over there as I invite the guest in here." Right?
Just define a limit.
A limit is when something the brain or the action that they're currently doing is escalating. And if you put a limitation on it, you're saying, "Okay, this is where we're stopping. Mm-hmm. Don't continue to bark," because with no limitation, they keep barking. And that's the thing that people don't want. Is the continue to bark. But what we do want is to put a limitation on it. That's the difference, right? On now, what do I want? I want to, you can bark. Thank you for letting me know. Now I got it from here. The limitation is like, from this point on, I'd like for you to go to the bed. I want you to go hang out over there as I invite the guests. So the limitation is just stopping from what they're currently doing to let them know you're not wrong for what you just did. I'm not making you wrong for it. It's just saying, I got it from here.
Do you think people really understand it? Do you think people, how clear do you think?
No, we wouldn't have a job if we didn't.
So here's the thing. I don't know if you remember yourself personally. I remember the first dog I got. We have a dog and a cat, and she's really excited towards the cat, and I can't control this excitement. And I remember somebody said, "Oh, you need boundary training." And in my mind, I clearly remember, what the fuck is boundary training? What does that even mean? right? So back in the day, it seemed like right now it's laughable. I hear that word and I see 25 different elements of boundaries. But I think the concept of limits is completely lost on people because they can't even stop a behavior, right? So most people that we say this to, the concept of even stopping a behavior isn't there yet. So how can I allow something that I can't control? And I think that's another thing that people need to understand, that Jen cringes when people call and say, I like it when my dog's protective. It's like the word that makes her go, oh shit, because as soon as you want it, you get it without regulating it. But yeah, I think limits are really hard. Like allowing your dog the concept of, okay, I let my dog bark 6 times, or I let my dog bark for 20 seconds, and then I stop it so that my dog's protective. Like that doesn't, it makes no sense. But
we've been on, yeah, exactly. I was about to say, we've been on episodes where you're like, your daughter walked in or somebody, and then like they barked or something, and you're like, hey, enough, like, and then it's done. Like, yep. Thank you for doing your role. I appreciate that, but you don't need to do that anymore. I got it from here.
And I think that limits help dogs feel the most understood in many ways too, because it separates them using their natural instinctive tools from always being wrong. And I think that's a pretty important distinction, because that protective element is hugely beneficial if you regulate it. Like right now, if some strange dude just walked into my house, I don't have to worry about what my dogs are going to do. They're going to go over there and I'm not going to stop them. They're not going to look back and be like, Dad, should we do this? I remember a long time ago, I had 5 or 6 dogs and something happened outside, like some sound happened outside. And I remember jumping up and running outside with this real intense purpose. And out of nowhere, almost like a school of fish, I heard this, and then there was a ball of dogs around me, moving with me. Like they're like, all right, we're going, let's go. That intuitive nature to follow your lead, as opposed to thinking that they have to go yap and protect at everything, but wait for your moment. That's when your dogs are really going to keep you safe. I don't lock my doors. Doesn't even come in.
It's funny because I live in a safer neighborhood now than I did before. In my old neighborhood, that wasn't very safe. That wasn't, bad, but I didn't feel safe in certain. We never locked our doors, but here in the house where we feel very safe, we actually lock the doors. We actually got one of those doors that automatically locks.
Oh yeah.
After like 20 minutes, so we just close the door and it locks on its own.
I wonder how many dogs would really be protective. And let me ask you this: do you think a dog's more protective if the human's the legit pack leader, or do you think the dogs are more protective if one of the dogs is in charge?
The dog, 100%, because there's that trust factor. Like,
wait, you're saying if the human's the pack leader, they're more protective?
No, less protective.
What's that?
Less protective.
Less protective. Excuse me.
Yeah, because I feel being a role of a leader is that of being protected. I feel safe. I feel safe and secure around this person. If there's no clarity, uncertainty, then they feel the need to, I have to protect. So like you're talking about when Jen cringes, it's because the dogs are doing a role that they are not fit to do.
See, I think the intensity of a dog being protective comes a little higher if you're in charge. And I'll tell this is just from this little part is that
interesting.
And I'll say the reason I believe this is that in nature, the pack leader is indispensable, but the pack isn't. The pack is I can go find another one.
Hang on, let me think about that. The pack leader is indispensable.
Uh-huh. So they'll die to protect the pack leader, where the pack leader will fight tooth and nail to protect the pack, but ultimately like walk away when they can see it's futile. Right. So it's like you'll get solid protection from both. Now, a front dog is going to be stronger in an aggressive situation, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get plenty of fight from back. Like Blue to me is a good example is I think Blue could be a difficult dog if she was in the front. And I think you could have like a dog that wants to control everything. But from where she is in the family, I think she has this instinct of protection at a more connected level. Let's put it that way. I think since the back is going to be connected to you differently than it would be the other way around, I think it's from that.
I'll have to sit on that one for a while.
Yeah, this is an opinion piece. It's
yeah.
And the one thing when I got wrecked by that dog in my backyard, I didn't see what happened, but the pack that I had, including all of my dogs, were on the other side of the fence on a locked gate, and they busted through the gate and came over. Now, it's not like I saw 2 or 3 dogs jumping on that dog to save me, but they may have, had it just been me and that dog, because the owner was there to break it up. But I'm curious as to what would have happened in that case.
Interesting. Anyways, all right.
Yeah.
What else did we experience at TCW that, oh shit, did you hear that?
What was it?
It was like a little shock. It was like I have a bug zapper thing,
Oh.
and I forgot to turn it off. And I think I told you this about my dog. He just got up, like it freaked him out. Like he just, and I don't know if I told you the one time, let me shut this off real quick. Hang on. There was one time where we were keeping him in like just free roaming at night. Well, he still does, but we were keeping him in the laundry room. It was separated by a baby gate, and he was fine there. Like we had a bed in there. It was like his little nook. He freaking loved it. And we had these fruit flies I was trying to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought this thing on Amazon. And then one day I get up and he's pacing and like super anxious. I'm like, dude, what the heck happened? Like this, you're not normally anxious. And I'm like looking around and I'm like, did someone come in? Like what happened? I'm just trying to figure out. And all of a sudden I hear that thing and he just like jumped. And I was like, that's what it was. And so he just got up right now, but he's not pacing, but he got up like, what the hell is that?
And that's
funny
and it doesn't take much. So something similar happened with us here, but it was a smoke detector and Hercules. So we would cook, and we were going through this phase where we were using a cast iron skillet, doing a lot of searing, and so it would get really smoky. Mm-hmm. And then the smoke would set off the smoke detector, and the smoke detector would do the same thing to Hercules that you're describing about this dog, and start to pace around and go into a different room. And then it happened 2 or 3 times. So that when we would start cooking and he would hear the on the stove, he would start to move away, because it was earlier and earlier in the anticipation. So I just had to put a leash on and be like, no, you're not going to.
Yeah.
And it didn't take much, but you can see how an owner could get trapped in something like that really fast. A couple of cooking sessions and your smoke detector goes off and now your dog's pacing in circles and you don't know what to do. You're like, it's okay, buddy. It's okay. And again, it's because we have the luxury of always having a clear picture of what we want versus what we see, right? So you can immediately go into the what should I do here when I see this behavior? That's a luxury that we have. But it's knowledge. Like we were talking about at the beginning, one of the worst things is to have knowledge before experience. But in that particular, there is time when what you're basically trying to do is say, what would I want from my dog right now if they're nervous and pacing around? Well, what's the opposite of that? They're not pacing around.
Right.
That's where people get lost in, okay, now what should I do? Well, put a leash on them, stop the pacing. It seems too easy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of it goes back to the intellect. Intellect is super complicated. There's nothing easy about being smart, learning to drive a car, play a guitar, and when it gets down to dogs, I mean, at this point if I were to say, what do I see when I see a dog? I see 2 things first. The direction the brain's going and the intensity level that it's doing it. That's like the first thing that I'm going to see. And then it's all right, what do I want from this dog? How do I feel? All kind of happening simultaneously. And the other thing I think too is if you really were to look at, picture this right now. So imagine in your mind, we're handing dogs off to students. So for people who have never been to TCW and are just listening to this, every morning the students go up and we hand dogs to them. So everybody or most everybody ends up with a dog in their hand. And we circle up to give some morning announcements and a little bit of direction. What nobody, at least very few people seem to do is nothing. Like very few people seem to consciously take the strategy of anchoring themselves to the ground in a balanced way, understanding that as soon as the dog can recognize movement isn't going to happen, there's an anchored feeling to the ground of being balanced and anchored, and there's nothing else. Almost all the dogs just relax. But you end up with too much effort, but without an ending. Like it feels like to me, it's effort without an ending. Like they don't know where they need to stop. Like what is it that you're trying to create with the dog right now? Well, he's pulling. Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't tell me what you're trying to create. You're telling me what's happening. So in your mind right now, you're picturing a dog pulling. You're not picturing a dog not pulling. You're picturing, right? So people are picturing what's happening and what they should do. And you said it perfectly because I almost did a post on it this morning. It's funny you did one yesterday. They're not picturing what they want first. The first question people ask when the dog starts doing something is,
What do I do?
"What do I do?" Right? That's the first question everybody, what do I do here? And what's the first question you ask them when they say that?
What do you want?
That's the first question I ask too. What do you want? How often are they clear about it?
They're not clear. They're like, have to think about it. Like, oh, I really thought about it. I'm like, well, let's focus on that first. So what do you want? Right. There was, I think it was on the first day when we circled up, there was that lady who had that yellow lab, and she was like the dog, I can't remember if it was getting excited or what, but she in her mind wanted this dog to relax. She wanted the dog to sit down, but what she was doing was she was correcting the dog, like popping the leash. And it wasn't like harsh or anything, but it just was too much. And you grabbed it, and and then you did nothing. You just grabbed the leash and you let the dog get to the leash, and you just stood there. And the pressure that created, the dog was, I can't go that way anymore. And then it just relieves the pressure itself. And then we got to a point where she was after, meaning to relax. And then you're like, just do less.
Just like that guy, do less, man. You got to do less.
Yeah.
You need to create a meme with that guy because it is perfect. No, man. You got to do more, man. You got to do more. Yeah. I mean, that's a classic example of experience over knowledge. That's a classic example of going, okay, the first thing that I want this dog to do is feel that we're not moving. Or actually, in my mind, the first thing I'm trying to pass to the dog is the understanding that you won't create the movement. Like right now, there's nothing you can do that's going to make you feel like you're moving us. And so I think, that little concept of the psychology of who moves who is a big difference between, if you want to say dog training versus dog psychology, or the whole deal is, as soon as a dog feels that you can't sit still or that they can move you, that movement or the thing you're trying to control will never settle. Right? So the people don't think, how can I create a sense that we're not moving? Right? Well, don't move. and then the people think the tension in the leash seems to be coming from the dog, not realizing it's coming from them. Like somebody's got to release the tension. And that's the other part too, since the majority of everything we use on a leash. So to the question earlier, what do we see is some of the things that get in the way? This is the other one. So anybody listening, I don't care if you're a professional, if you're just a dog owner, pay attention to what programming has been created with the leash. And what I mean by that is if you go out right now and you take a dog and you put a little bit of pressure to the right, does your dog move with the pressure, or does your dog oppose the pressure? Because the majority of the time, these dogs have been conditioned in reverse, where a little bit of pressure to one direction tells them to pull the other. Pressure in this direction pulls this way. And then when you pull up or back, they go forward, as opposed to the leash being direction, it's opposition. And as soon as the programming is opposition, trying to teach the dog to do not pull you and all these things becomes an impossibility because it's a coding. And then it's a numbers game. One of my students was like, yeah, that numbers that you told me about the walk, it was like, boom.
But also because when they've created that opposition, that actually works to my benefit sometimes, because I can use that to my benefit in certain situations.
How so?
Because like, let's say, if a person pulls back on the leash, there's that 45-degree angle that happens, which actually is encouraging or the dog to pull even more, right? So if I want the dog to become still, if I just reverse the pressure, meaning not back, but up or forward, then the dog moves back. You know what I mean? So the dog so I'm already taking the dog's understanding of what pressure is and the way they've been used to it, and I just use it to my advantage.
Well, especially with aggressive dogs. When you have a dog that wants to lunge at you and you put that pressure down from the front, it can oftentimes kind of push them down and have them back up, except for the dogs that it doesn't. Right. Once in a while, I remember in the circle, I had a dog that did that. The dog was getting reactive towards its owner. And then I stepped in and took the leash and it got reactive towards me. And when I put pressure towards me, it pulled it up into me. Yeah. Because it was following the pressure at that time. It was like a hell of a time for it to follow the pressure of the leash.
Yeah. But that's also, here's the other thing. So that in that same situation, most of the time people will pull up and away, which is actually telling the dog to keep coming at you.
Yep.
In those situations, I pull towards me, or even like, I don't know if you were there when there was a dog that was getting a little snappy, and the way I was able to grab the collar stick my thumb through the collar and pull it towards me.
Yep.
So I remove that motion of this, but also I can take away the motion of him moving towards me or even away. I'm just keeping him stationary right there.
Yeah.
I also
If
had
you
the
could
leash and the
grab 'em,
collar.
pull like if you grab a collar and grab it on either side this way, I can't get the right angle right here,
Yeah.
and pull it towards you, kind of
Right.
lock it and pull this way, you can create that lock effect too.
Yeah.
That's where I'll go back to the thing that Lynn said, learn how to kind of manipulate your dog in play. Really get in there and understand how to move and where there are little pivot points and pressure points and how when you move them one way, they'll roll this way, or you touch them this way, the back end will kick around this way. And it's just like you in jiu-jitsu. It's learning how the body mechanics work and what is and isn't likely to happen in certain situations. That physical awareness of how to move the dog, again, everything starts to matter. So many people try to get a dog to move and not move their feet. They want the dog to go from the right side to the left side, and they try to pull the dog over as opposed to, I always remind people you can't move a horse with flat feet. You always got to make little movements to get them to move. I think that at the end of the day, what I see is that the students are their tunnel vision on corrections and their tunnel vision on how they try to get the dog to not pull. And everything that comes out of those two interactions leads to more disconnect. So the little strategies are the little things we try to get the students to do becomes difficult because the leash isn't working for them as good as it can. They're not clear in the picture of what they want, and they're not reading the feedback of how this is playing out. So just like in, what's the definition of insanity? They seem to continue to do the same thing multiple times. And by the time it's made aware or they catch it, it's already a habit. Like we've talked about patterns in previous episodes. They don't realize that after just 3 minutes, you've created habits and patterns already that you got to see to break.
I am on one of the Facebook groups of the class that just finished from Fundamentals 1. And someone had posted, it's actually Christine Chang. I'm going to give her a shout out because she has her own podcast that seems to be pretty good. Anyways, Christine was showing a video of her dog Boba. She was trying to get the dog to calm surrender to the food, right? And she was doing everything right as far as like time. And then she goes, but as soon as I give the release word, the excitement comes back. I was like, change the pattern. I go, so what you're saying is you're actually, that motion towards the food is creating that step is every step they take towards the food is increasing that anticipation, right? I said, so change it up. As soon as they calm down, the food comes towards them. Change it up. Just let the food come towards them, and then then they stay in that calm state, that calm surrender state longer because what happens they're not truly calm. They're anticipating, but if let's say they get calm, and then we start feeding the food comes toward them instead of them coming towards the food, then we've changed that pattern.
Well, explain why, Art, because there is like I'll go back to I talked earlier. Now we're getting back into the intellect, and I think this is where intellect can come into play. So there are behavioral mechanics to why we do feeding events that way. What is it? Like that last second the dog goes to the food does what?
The last second. So it basically allows the dog to not, because here's the thing, they're anticipating the release word. With the release word, our voice, the sound, the ears trigger excitement. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a moment where the dog doesn't do that. So how do we take it out and still feed them at the same time? Because I think when people look at it, they're like, well, they've got to feed, and I can't be here for another 2 hours waiting while they're building up and getting anxious and things like that. So if you get them to a calm surrender state, and then you don't say, okay, because that just triggers back to the opposite of what you just were trying to create. So now I was like, okay, well.
And the other thing is like, this is the part mechanically that I was referring to is we talk a lot about the last second of an event. Right. So if you're trying to get your dog around a cat and you're able to get that dog to relax for a moment, and it never really has, and you get it to relax and then you take it away, that last second becomes where the memory starts to be built upon. Right. The last second of an interaction, the last second and a half of an interaction. And then ultimately we're trying to build that up to where the dog can stay calm longer. But we know the importance of how things end. Right. And it really doesn't matter. I mean, if you're a basketball coach, you don't want to let let your players run a play incorrectly and end your practice. if you're I was watching this something on Tiger Woods on the flight home, and he was talking about like he would end all his putting practices with these certain drills, and he would only end when he made it. Like it didn't matter how many times it took him to go through this, he would only finish his practice on the one that went in. And it has to do with the way the brain picks up from the last thing it did. Right. So if you feed your dog with all of this intensity, like let's say you get your dog to relax, and then you go, okay, and you go to the food. What's its last second? Excitement. Doesn't matter how much calm you did at the beginning. Its last second is the memory of excitement. So the next time it's the same. And you're right. All the triggers, everything you're saying is the trigger of it. But it's as simple as the last second of your event builds the next beginning of the next event. And so if we can get the dog to relax and set the food in front of them, and then this is important too when we're doing this stuff, is don't just expect your dog to relax for that 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Change it up. They'll anticipate that. And ultimately you're trying to get from 1 second to infinity, to where the presence of food only allows for that behavior. But I think and again, but it's funny that how we started the conversation, but I think this is where having some behavioral knowledge, I didn't know that when I started, by the way. These are things that I kind of pieced together after the fact, after listening to like Caesar and a couple people talk. But that little mechanical piece is important to everything.
Yeah. And the feeding event could be different for even my pack. I do it differently for each dog. Each dog has most of them wait for it, but I have one that, because she's it's Nogi, the food comes to her because she gets really worked up. Like she gets like, she changes. You could just like her body, her eyes is like that. She just changes. Like she looks like a psycho when she does this. And having to slow her down is, now she like will look at me. She still look at me, but really excited still. So
do you ever encourage excitement for feeding?
Sometimes, like, do you ever see JoJo's videos when she was feeding Eddie?
No.
So, she would serve like the food, and Eddie would do that little jump that she does. Super cute. Our dog Luna does the exact same thing. She'll like get excited, but then she brings it down. And I don't really correct her for getting excited, because I know that she's going to go back to just being like chill. But she gets really excited in the beginning. She does this little thing where she jumps up and she does like a little bark. I'm like, that's right. Yeah, we're about to get fed. And then she's like, I do have like a release word, which is her name. So I put all the food down. And sometimes I just, because she's old and I let her get by with a lot of things, I'll just put the food down. Whatever she wants to do, she can do. And I put the food down and I was like feeding all the other dogs. And because I didn't say her name, she was just like waiting there. And I'm just not paying attention. I'm just watching all the dogs. I look over and Luna's still like, are you gonna let me go? I was like, oh, sorry, I forgot.
Oh dear, sorry.
She would sit there all day long, like until I say, oh, you can go, Anyways,
our oldest dog we do, Maggie, I let her, because she'll jump and she does these circles and these spins and she's like 15, and it's awesome to see her get excited like that. So I definitely encourage excitement for her, but I don't feed her. The funny thing is she doesn't like to eat off a plate. So she likes to eat outside. So she doesn't eat around the other dogs.
Wow.
It's not that the excitement would interfere,
It's
but
her preference.
Yeah, it's just her preference, but that's one I encourage.
Cool.
All right, my man.
All right. Well, good episode. I'll see you next week.